One of the most distinctive Jaguars of all time, the Utah range, including the famous Mark II of 1959, was the very definition of the company's ethos for combining extreme luxury with unbeatable performance, all of which was wrapped up in an excellent timeless style that continues to turn heads even today. It was this reputation for luxury, but most of all power, that turned what was meant to be a mid-sized luxury saloon into the ultimate getaway vehicle for bank robbers during the 1960s, so much so that the British police constabularies had no choice but to buy a protract of these cars for themselves in order to keep pace with the criminal underclasses. The story of what would become the Jaguar Mark II begins with Project Utah during May 1952, which gave rise to the company's 2.4 and 3.4-litre Mark I, and would herald a number of firsts for the company, the most challenging of which was to move away from Jaguar's old chassis and body construction to a unitary construction, which was rapidly making inroads throughout the early 1950s across volume car production worldwide. In order to create their new car, Jaguar engineers Bill Thornton and Cyril Crouch worked with the Press Steel Company of Cowley to put the styling sketches done by Jaguar's founder and chairman Sir William Lyons into actual blueprints, while other members of the team included engineer Bob Knight, who was specifically tasked with overcoming the inherent problem of noise, vibration and harshness caused by the unibody construction. Noise, vibration and harshness were a characteristic of a unibody construction that presented new technical challenges, as while the old-fashioned methods of insulating a passenger car body from these problems with a chassis and separate body typically was done through rubber or other insulating materials, this dampening of unwanted vibrations and noise was proving difficult at the time to overcome with unibody cars. Knight, therefore, would spearhead efforts to overcome this pervasive issue, and would go on to become one of the foremost experts in this field, while the resultant body of the Jaguar Mark I was one of Sir William Lyons's and his team's greatest successes, and was a tribute to the Jaguar sales motto of Grace, Space, Pace. It was at this point that the Jaguar management faced a dilemma, as the company was already manufacturing the XK120 sports car and the large luxury Mark VII saloon, but this meant that their model range was comprised entirely of expensive cars with big engines that would put the firm into serious trouble in the event of an economic downturn and the naturally expected drop in luxury car sales, and thus the decision was made to develop a smaller and more economical model in order to survive. This had been understood from Jaguar's pre-war beginnings when they were called SS cars, where they had developed models using the Standard Motors 1.5-litre engine to make certain cars more affordable, while the Standard Motors 2.5 and 3.5-litre engines were installed into their more expensive offerings, while during World War II, Lyons and his engineers developed their own engines to power Jaguar models following the end of hostilities. To this end, the initial new engine design work focused on a dual overhead cam inline-six engine of 3.4 litres capacity, which would also be capable of having a reduced capacity by shortening its stroke to make it into a 2.4-litre engine, while in order to reach the desired 1.5-litre capacity, Jaguar's engineers had also worked on cutting down the 6 cylinders to 4, with a maximum 2-litre capacity, thus presenting a range of 3 engines whose capacities corresponded to the pre-war engine choices, but which would have been more advanced than the old Standard Motors units. In the 1952 design and planning for the new Jaguar saloon, both the 2.4-litre 6-cylinder and 2-litre 4-cylinder engine options were worked on as a series of alternatives for the production car, but due to the proposed model being expected to weigh approximately 1.4 tons, the 4-cylinder unit had no possibility of powering the car to its specified top speed of 100 miles an hour, though as it turned out, the 2.4-litre 6-cylinder was borderline capable of achieving this goal. The other factor in abandoning the 4-cylinder engine was that it was seen to be too down-market, and therefore something that would cheapen the prestige of the Jaguar brand, while also not having the desired balance of a straight 6, and not being able to offer the same sort of smoothness unless it was fitted with a balancing system, such as that created by Frederick W. Lancaster back in 1904. Jaguar's engineers were forced to undertake a significant amount of tweaking to refine the 2.4-litre unit for production readiness, with the final 6-cylinder being a slightly shorter engine block than the 3.4-litre original, with a bore of 83mm and a stroke of 76.5mm, to create an engine with a capacity of 2,483 cc. This new engine being fitted with twin Solex carburetors, rather than Jaguar's traditional preference for the products of Skinner's Union, or SU, but could produce a healthy 112 horsepower. This sophisticated engine was mated to a British Moss 4-speed manual gearbox, which only had synchromesh on the top 3 gears, but did provide the option of a Laycock de Normanville electric overdrive for quick and economical open-road travel. The front suspension was mounted on a separate subframe, as this was one of the methods used to reduce the noise, vibration and harshness in the unibody car, and was designed by William Haynes, which used double wishbones and coil springs with telescopic shock absorbers and an anti-roll bar at the front, while for the rear, a simplified version of that used on the Jaguar D-Type sports car was employed, with the live axle being supported by inverted semi-elliptic leaf springs, which were cantilevered into the rear of the unibody in rubber-insulated bushes. These springs served the role of trailing arms, and the lateral support for the live axle was provided using a panhard rod, with the inverted leaf springs serving to transfer the load of the live axle forward into the unibody shell, while the Salisbury live rear axle gave the car a narrower rear-end track than the front, which was done simply because the off-the-shelf Salisbury axle was the only one close enough to fit it. By September 1954, Jaguar had 2 prototype Utahs running, and an off-tools prototype was completed on January 7, 1955, the car being finally unveiled to the public at the 1955 Earl's Court Motor Show on October 19th, where it now went under the official name of the Jaguar 2.4-litre, and would be sold in 2 versions, the standard and the special equipment. The cheaper £1,269 standard model lacked the heater, tachometer, folding centre armrest in the rear, screen washers, twin fog lamps, cigar lighter, and courtesy rear switches for the interior rear lighting found on the £1,298 special equipment model, though most buyers were prepared to spend an extra £29 for the special equipment version. Despite the Earl's Court unveiling, the reality was that only 32 Jaguar 2.4 litres were built in 1955, and most of those were retained by the factory for development and PR work, while it would not be until the summer of 1956 before the press were allowed to evaluate the cars for themselves. But even then, it was not uncommon for Jaguar's PR department at the Browns Lane factory to supply specially prepared or tuned cars for press reviews. The result was a highly positive press response to the 2.4-litre, while the machine also had relatively few teething troubles upon introduction, with 8,029 being produced during 1956. While tuning kits were also made available for customers who wished to push up the engine's performance to 119, 131 and 150 horsepower respectively, while Jaguar were also planning to install the taller 3.4-litre XK engine into the machine as a high-performance option that would woo the American market, which considered the 2.4-litre engine underpowered. As the 3.4-litre engine was heavier than the 2.4, the front suspension had to be improved with stronger coil springs, and the rear axle was strengthened to cope with the increased torque provided by the larger engine, though underperforming drum brakes remained, until Jaguar were able to figure out how to apply disc brakes to their models, and a new automatic transmission was made available in the form of a 3-speed Borg-Warner Type DG, an American design now being made at their UK factory at Letchworth in Hertfordshire. Sadly, just as Jaguar were in the process of building up stocks of the new 3.4-litre Utahs, with priority being given to the export market, a fire swept through the Browns Lane factory on February 12, 1957, destroying many cars, including some of the new models, but thanks to the workforce and contractors working around the clock, limited production was restarted after only 9 days, but it wouldn't be until 6 weeks later before production was back to full capacity. Despite the fire, the 3.4-litre cars did make it to the United States during the spring of 1957 and earned positive reviews from autocritics, while over the next 2 years, there were numerous changes to the Utah, including a larger grille during November 1957, as well as an automatic transmission for the 2.4-litre version, while disc brakes appeared during January 1958 as a conversion kit, before becoming standard a year later in January 1959. However, during the summer of 1958, what was known as the Utah Mark II was already in development, with the intention being to improve areas such as heating and ventilation, poor driving visibility, an interior that was perceived as being old-fashioned, high-speed handling, and a modernized exterior, with Lyons personally revising the styling, particularly around the rear window pillars, and with a new front grille, which transformed the look of the upcoming Mark II with minimal cost to Jaguar. Berman power steering was developed for the car as an optional extra, but the various revisions made to the Utah design added an extra 112 to 167 pounds of weight to the car, and thus to compensate, Jaguar fitted the B-type cylinder head to the 2.4-litre engine, boosting the power to 120 horsepower, while the 3.4-litre was retained in its existing form, and a new 3.8-litre version of the XK engine was added to the mix, presenting 220 horsepower. The first Mark II prototypes, which were simply modified Mark Is, began to appear during the summer of 1959, and was formally announced in October of the same year, with the outgoing version of the Utah being referred to as the Mark I and the new car the Mark II, with the initial batch going on sale during December 1959, though in order to tide over the transition from Mark I to Mark II, the Mark I remained in production exclusively in special equipment guise. The first auto reviews were undertaken in early 1960, which remained highly positive, though again, Jaguar had not been fully honest when providing the press with demonstration cars, as due to the increased weight, the 2.4-litre model could not reach the minimum standard of 100 miles an hour for all Jaguar cars, only topping out at 98 miles an hour while under factory test, and thus Jaguar kept this embarrassing fact under wraps. The Mark II also had problems with regard to a series of niggling industrial disputes involving inspectors and plans by the management to introduce female polishers, with the most notable strike taking place on March 31, 1960, when 120 employees walked off the factory floor, while on May 26th of the same year, it was announced that Jaguar Cars Limited had arranged to buy for cash the ailing Daimler company from the Birmingham Small Arms Group after years of mismanagement by the notorious Sir Bernard Docker and his wife Lady Docker. The procurement of Daimler was purely strategic, not so much for the company's range of models, but more for the fact that Jaguar could exploit the acquisition of the firm's Radford factory in Coventry, as attempts to expand Jaguar's own facilities had been refused planning permission. This addition of over 1 million square feet of floor space coming alongside the announcement that Jaguar's longtime rival Armstrong Siddeley were quitting the car industry in June 1960, thus meaning that, following Daimler's acquisition on June 18th at a cost of £3.4 million, Jaguar was the largest mid-level luxury car maker in Britain. Originally, Jaguar intended to transfer XK engine production to Radford to free up more space for production at Browns Lane, but despite Daimler's product range being largely outdated and commercially underperforming, their crown jewel was by far the 2.5-litre Daimler V8 engine that had been designed by Edward Turner for the SP250 sports car. With Jaguar's acquisition of Daimler, it was instead decided to supplant Daimler's own replacement for the SP250, the DP250, with Project ZX530112, under the leadership of Phil Weaver, which initially took a Mark I and fitted it with a 2.5-litre Daimler V8, leading to performance that was far better than expected, and thus resulted in a Mark II soon being installed with the V8, and a Borg-Warner Type 35 automatic transmission, with 2 test cars being evaluated over the next 16 months to iron out the bugs. The early 1960s proved to be the boom years for Jaguar, as during 1961 alone, the company announced the Jaguar XKE, better known as the E-Type, a car that on looks alone caused a sensation, added to further by its 150-mile-an-hour reported top speed, while the top-of-the-range Mark X Saloon was also announced as a car that would take the battle to Rolls-Royce and Bentley in terms of absolute luxury, though the main breadwinner of the Jaguar company remained the Mark II Saloon, with 21,236 units sold during 1962. Also during 1962, amid a series of unofficial strikes caused at Jaguar's factories due to the demands of meeting large American orders, the Daimler 2.5-litre V8, a Daimler variant of the Mark II, was announced on October 8, which externally looked no different from the regular Mark II, with the exception of the Daimler fluted grille and badging, and was priced between its 2.4 and 3.4-litre Jaguar cousins, establishing Daimler as more upmarket within the Jaguar range, but deferred to the more sporting image of the bigger engine cars. The resultant Daimler 2.5 V8 was lauded by critics for its 112-mile-an-hour performance, though unfortunately the car was never exported to the United States, as the senior Jaguar engineers considered the power unit unrefined when compared to the 6- and 12-cylinder engines, a view that cost them dearly, especially when considering their own later troubled development of the Jaguar V12 during 1971 for the Series 3 E-Type. However, while the 2.5-litre V8 was indeed a powerful car, it was the 3.8-litre Mark II that truly made a name for itself, especially in the realm of the criminal underclasses, where these cars could be acquired easily, and with nothing in the arsenal of the British police forces, could nimbly escape from crime scenes while outmanoeuvring the constabulary's Ford Anglias and Wolseley 6110s. The Mark II's association with crime reached its zenith when it was found that 3.8-litre examples had been involved in the Great Train Robbery of 1963, and with the robbery itself being a cultural milestone of British criminal history, as well as sparking various imitators, the police forces had no choice but to arm themselves accordingly with a selection of their own Mark IIs in order to match the robbers. Meanwhile, back at Jaguar, the company announced on September 30th what was originally known as the Utah Mark III to replace the Mark II, which would eventually come to pass as the S-Type, though in terms of mechanical changes, these modifications were restricted to the car simply being a Mark II with independent rear suspension. However, while the Mark II was the hot acquisition of both the police and the criminals they pursued, the company's situation was facing trouble amid Jaguar's continued aggressive expansion, including the purchase of Coventry Climax, a forklift truck and racing car engine manufacturer in 1963, as well as abortive discussions to buy Colin Chapman's Lotus, though strike action remained crippling across all sectors of the firm. Meanwhile, the Mark II's place as the trendsetter for high-performance luxury cars in a practical body was facing new competition from both sides of the Atlantic, with the rise of muscle cars in the United States essentially filling the same role as the Mark II in a domestic capacity, while back home in Britain, Rover introduced the P6 2000 as the firm's first foray into a performance luxury car on par with the Mark II, and presented some stiff rivalry on the home market, this soon being joined by the Triumph 2000 as Leyland's response to the P6. The combination of muscle cars, the P6 and the 2000, as well as continued strike action within the ranks of Jaguar, meant what was meant to be the laying of a sustained winning hand was starting to falter significantly for the company. But in spite of this, Jaguar continued to undertake significant expansions to increase both floor space and strategic influence, including the purchase of Henry Meadows of Wolverhampton in January 1965, a producer of diesel engines and light engineering goods, which was acquired to provide additional manufacturing facilities for the Jaguar Cummins diesel engine project. The good was still mixed with the bad, though, as amid Jaguar's production director, John Silver, being charged with fraud and sentenced to 18 months in prison, June 9, 1965, would see production halted at Browns Lane when two polishers refused to do a 3-minute job that was sent back as below standard, thus leading to their fellow 60 polishers stopping work in solidarity and crippling production for 2,500 men. This strike lasting until July 2nd, and would cost Jaguar between £3 and £4 million. Matters were made worse when the British Motor Corporation, or BMC, announced their acquisition of Press Steel during 1965, which was the main body supplier for Jaguar and the vast majority of the UK's major car builders, thus meaning that BMC had the ability to know Jaguar's secrets, as well as strangling supply to the company should they feel so inclined. With this in mind, Jaguar was facing a bleak future, with February 1966 seeing Sir William Lyons summarising that the problems of strikes, particularly the June 1965 stoppage, had cost the company £5 million, and with no guarantee of the company's future, it was formally announced in July 1966 that Jaguar would merge with BMC to create British Motor Holdings, or BMH, with the deal being amounted to £18.2 million. Jaguar had been an attractive prospect for BMC for a while, especially in consideration of how, through aggressive expansion tactics, Lyons had increased annual production for the company from 20,876 cars in 1959 to 25,936 cars in 1966. And while Lyons has often been accused of selling out to BMC due to him having no family heir to replace him as chairman, the reality of the situation was that Jaguar was simply not making enough cars and money, despite the acclaim being poured into its models by mainly British journalists. The situation at Jaguar was so bad that in September 1966, the company was forced to go on a 4-day week until March 1967, while for the Mark II, a number of economy measures were adopted to reduce the cost of manufacture, including substituting ambler vinyl for leather upholstery, though this was not stated publicly to avoid customer backlash. On September 26, 1967, Jaguar announced the 240 and 340 saloons as the last variation of the original Utah design, with the main visual difference being the new slimmer front and rear bumpers, while the cars also made use of plastic technology, such as ambler plastic being put in place of genuine wood veneer as a cost-saving measure, together with other cheaper materials such as the carpet. Mechanically, the 3.8-litre was dropped, and only the 2.4 and 3.4-litre units were available, with the Solex carburetors of the 2.4-litre engine being replaced by SUs on a new manifold for the 240. These revisions meaning peak power output for these cars was now only 133 horsepower. However, the replacement for the original Daimler 2.5 V8, known as the Daimler V8 250, would avoid the economy measures inflicted on the 240 and 340, with changes including slimline bumpers and overriders, while inside, safety padding over the instrument panel, padded door cappings and ventilated upholstery to improve safety and comfort were provided, and the previously optional features were now fitted as standard, including reclining split-bench front seats, a heated rear window, and an alternator replacing the dynamo. However, this new range of Jaguars were expected to face their defeat when Rover announced the installation of a 3.5-litre Buick V8 engine into their P5 and P6 models, which began to appear from mid-1967 with the Rover P5B. Though before the full effects of Rover's new wave of high-performance luxury cars could be felt, BMH and the Leyland Group, which controlled both Rover and Triumph, merged to create British Leyland in May 1968, thus meaning Jaguar could now concentrate on the XJ4 program as a replacement for the Mark II without worrying about replacing the compact saloons, which were about to be culled to make way for the new car. Slowly, the Utah heritage was taken out of circulation, starting with the S-Type in August 1968, while in September of the same year, the XJ4 finally entered sales as the XJ6 saloon and garnered instant critical and commercial acclaim, and such was the demand for this new car that in February 1969, Jaguar introduced its first ever night shift in an effort to keep up. As for the last lingering members of the Utah range, the 240 saloon ceased production on April 9, 1969, in order to free up floor space at Browns Lane for the XJ6, while the final examples of this lineage, the Daimler V8 250, would emerge on August 5th of the same year, bringing an end to the Utah project after 14 years of circulation, with the future of Jaguar's saloon range now firmly with the XJ series. Following the end of production, the Mark I, Mark II, S-Type, 240, 340 and Daimler V8 series would quickly decline into obscurity and find themselves fetching highly depreciated values throughout the 1970s and into the 1980s, with most of the compact saloons, once life expired, finding themselves unceremoniously disposed of on the banger circuits or rusting away in stockyards. However, come the 1980s, a new appreciation for classic Jaguars began to take hold, especially following the appearance of a Regency Red 1960 Mark II in 1987's television detective drama Inspector Morse, as driven by the titular character, played by the late John Thor. This car reigniting interest in the compact saloons, and was eventually given away in 2002 after production of the series had wrapped, before being sold in November 2005 for more than £100,000. Today, the Jaguar Mark II and its wider Utah range is cherished as a true staple of British classic motoring, for the fact that not only was it an exceptional mixture of style and substance, but was also a cornerstone of 1960s British culture through its use by criminals, while finding a new recognition during the 1980s and 90s during its appearance under the ownership of Inspector Morse. In reality, the Jaguar Utah range is the tip of the iceberg when it comes to the highly complex history of the Jaguar company, the car beginning with the Mark I as very much a product of the company's immediate post-war thinking, while the Mark II and Daimler V8 marked its peak, and the 240, 340 and S-Type were endemic of Jaguar's decline throughout the mid-1960s, that ultimately led it straight into the hands of BMC and British Leyland.